Longtime Browns beat reporter Tony Grossi talked about the Raiders and the Raiders game.
They're very beatable, even though they beat the Ravens. They're one win, but they're one of the worst run defense teams. Here we go again. They keep playing teams that are inefficient against the run, so they have to run the ball. And I say take those two tight ends off the field, the guys they had out there, Blake Whiteheart and Jeff Swain. Put the big guys back on the field. And smash mouth the ball, and hopefully that gives you a lead. And then, in the meantime, Watson gets a little more accurate, makes it a little more better decisions than wrong ones.
So, Tim, I know you wrote an article, 3 things to know about the Browns' Week 4 opponent, the Raiders. So, number 1, Max Crosby isn't quite himself, but he's still a problem. Number 2, Davante Adams some help at receiver this year, and the Raiders looked like 2 different teams the last 2 weeks. So take us through that.
We'll start with number 1. We already talked a little bit about Max Crosby. Obviously, going through a high ankle sprain, but considering the issues the Browns have had on the offensive line, the last thing they can do is treat Max Crosby like he's anything but 100% because he's arguably the most relentless pass rusher in the NFL. People just don't. Maybe he doesn't get the respect he deserves because the Vegas Raiders haven't quite been a good team the last few years, but Crosby's really good. So even though he wasn't 100% against the Panthers last week, you got to prepare and you got to go out there every single snap if you're, the offensive line preparing for 100% Max Crosby. You can't do anything else because he's earned that kind of respect. Number 2 is going down to the offense. Davante Adams, one of the best receivers in the NFL, he finally got some help this year. The Raiders, 1 pick after the Broncos drafted Bo Nix. They take Brock Bowers, who I really loved out of Georgia, and he's having a great season so far. 197 receiving yards through 3 games. He had 98 on 9 catches against Baltimore. So now that's another really good receiver in Davante Adams, who you got to watch out for. But whoever's at quarterback for the Raiders, likely Gardner Minshew, they now have 2 good weapons to throw out there. So you got to be prepared to defend Brock Bowers because he's performing kind of at a level similar to what we saw from Sam Laporta. And number 3, I'm going to I said this line in here, but kind of what Eminem would say, with the real Las Vegas Raiders, please stand up. Because we saw in week 2, they went into Baltimore. The Ravens blew a 10-point lead in the 4th quarter to the Raiders in week 2 and lost that game. But then the Raiders turned around 1 week later, and then they got embarrassed at home by the Carolina Panthers. I know that was that ended as a 14-point loss, but at one point they were down by 26 points to a team that just benched the number 1 overall pick in Bryce Young. I think Jimmy Johnson was on Fox ripping, Carolina ownership, how well things haven't gone. People were talking, is this one of the worst teams ever? Could the Panthers go 0-17? And then they let Andy Dalton just cook them to the tune of 319 yards, 3 touchdowns. They let Chuba Hubbard go for 114 yards. And they got completely embarrassed by the team that I think we all thought, the team that was the worst team in the NFL last season, certainly we all thought was going to be the worst team in the NFL again. So who are the real Las Vegas Raiders? I have no idea who they are, and we'll probably get an answer one way or another this Sunday.